Good evening. Today's daf is daf Samach Aleph. We are going to begin now by the Mishnah. For the past few Mishnahs, the Mishnah was enumerating different takonas that the Chachamim made from Darkei Sholem. So we're going to now learn the different halachas in continuation to these halachas of takonas Chachamim of Darkei Sholem. So the Mishnah starts off and says, Mash'eles isha lechaverta hachashuda al hashvis. A woman could lend her friend kalim, even though this friend is suspected with regards to taking perish shvis. The halacha is that you're allowed to eat perish shvis. Kol zman, the Gemara learns out, kol zman, the perish are still found in the field. The minute that there's no more of those pears in the field, the halacha is you're not allowed to eat pears shvis, and you have to be mafkir those pears shvis. So you have this person who doesn't care about these halachas, and she's choshid that she takes pears shvis and is not mafkir it. The halacha is that a woman can still lend this other woman who's choshid for taking pears shvis. What could she lend? So the Mishnah says, anafa, kvara, b'richayim v'taner. A winnow, a sieve, a mill, and an oven. So these kalim are not considered being misayeh l'dvar avera because you're just giving her a keli. Could be she's going to use it, could be she won't use it. It's not a direct cause of being misayeh l'dvar avera. So therefore, even though she's chosheh for shvius, nevertheless, when it comes to anafa, kvara, b'richayim v'taner, it's not a problem. However, the Mishnah says, when it comes to either again, but she may not. The tover means she's not allowed to select the grain and from the chaff or grind wheat with her. Why? Because those actions are actively assisting her to be Masayeh l'dvar avera. When it comes to the actual kalim, so maybe she'll use it, maybe she won't use it. But when it comes to the taking the grain from the shaft, which is a direct cause, that's by mamish taking the pair of shvis and being Masayeh, actually doing something with it, then that's a very big problem. So that's the first halacha. Next halacha, the Mishnah says, Eishes chaver. Eishes chaver means the wife of a Talmud Chacham. Mash'eles, the Eishes Amaretz. She could lend out to the wife of an Amaretz. What could she lend out? Anafa, ukvara, ubereres, v'techenes. So she could lend out a winnow, a sieve, and she may even, the chiddush is, she may even select, grind, and sift with her. Now, aval mishitotel es I skipped uberes v'techenes umeraketes ima, and also she's allowed to be sift with her, sift the flowers, even though this woman is being choshid, even though this amaretz, the eishes amaretz, is being choshid that she does not actually take off meiser. So that's the din. However, once the wife of the Amoritz places water onto the flour, or I should say places flour or water into the flour, loy tiga ima, so the wife of the chaver is not allowed to help her. Why? Because we may not assist those who commit avedis. Now, the kulan, in all these cases, the Chachamim did not say, the only reason why the Chachamim said that it's mutter to lend kalim to people who are choshid and to be Messiah lehem shalei b'shas avera is elam b'nei Darkei Sholem, is because we don't want that there should be fights and strife, so the Chachamim were makel over here. The last din is, umachzikin yidei goyim b'shvis, we're allowed to assist goyim who work the land during Shvis, during the sabbatical year, Avaloi al Yidei Yisrael, but one may not assist Gittin who do this. The Shalom B'Shleimei, you're allowed to extend, you're allowed to say Shalom Aleichem to Goyim. B'nei Darkei Shalom, this is all B'nei Darkei Shalom, and the Gemara is going to elaborate this. We're going to learn about this tomorrow. Okay, so now the first din, the first din, the Gemara asks on the first two halachas. The Gemara asks, Ma'ishna Reisha, Ma'ishna Seifa. Why is it that what's the difference between the Reisha of the Mishnah and the Seifa of the Mishnah? Which means that when it comes to the din of Shvis, so we learned, Avaloi Tavar V'loi Titchen Imai. Why is it when it comes to Perish Shvis, the first halacha is that the woman can lend another woman who's choshit for eating perish shvis, either kalim she could lend, but when it comes to actually selecting or being boirer or grinding that perish shvis, that she's not allowed to. Yet when it comes to the Eishes Chaver to lend to the Amaretz, it says even which we know a Amaretz doesn't take off Meiser, but it says clearly that ubereres v'tichenes marakedes ima, that she could do these actions. So the question is, why is it in the Reisha when it comes to actually doing an action with the actual perish shvis? We said she cannot actually do something with the perish itself because that's mamash being Mesayel D'var Aveda. So how come in the case of the Eishes Chaver, which is more or less, it's not about perish shvis, it's about other halachas, it's about Meiser, but the same logic should apply, that when it comes to actually doing something with the item, it should be usher. So we have a series of answers. One answer, Rabbi Abaya says, Roiv Ame Ha'aretz Ma'aser Hein. The majority of Ame Ha'aratzim do take off Meiser. Now, so therefore, the chash that the food, which is called tevel, was not taken out, is only midrabanan. So Mepnei Darkei Shalom, the Chacham were matter that you could be Messiah. However, Choyshe the Shvis, that is Mamash Chash Midei Raisa, and therefore the Chachamim said that when it comes to Chash Midei Raisa, you cannot be Messiah when it comes to the actual fruit. That's one answer. Rava says no. Rava says Be'emes, for the both of them are Midei Raisa, and Hacha in regards to the first case, or I should say the second case of the wife of an Am Ha'aretz, we're talking about Am Ha'aretz to Remeir. We're talking about the way that Remeir classifies an Am Ha'aretz, who says what's an Am Ha'aretz, which means that he does know the halachos of Meiser, but he is not careful in eating chulin betara. Now, betuma detara and eating tuma, eating chulin, now betuma betara, and now tuma and tara of chulin is only midrabanan. Min hatera, person is allowed to eat. Min hatera, the Torah did not say that somebody who eats, that somebody has to eat betara only by truma and kachim. So therefore, Mifnei Darkei Shalom, they were matter to be Messiah, the wife, because by the case of the Meiser, we're talking about that the person is Nizar and Meiser, but he's not Nizar and eating chulin betara. So it's only chash midei raisa midrabanan. But when it comes to perish shvis, after the time of beer, like we explained, which is asur midei raisa, so then they are cheshit. The Gemara says the Tanya. We learned in the Rice. Ezo Am Ha'aretz, who is considered an Am Ha'aretz? Kol she'eino eichel chulin betara. Anybody who does not eat chulin in a state of tara. Divrei Remeir. These are the words of Remeir. Chacham Meirim. The Chacham say kol she'eino meiser pereisiv. Anybody who does not take meiser. Okay. So we have two answers. Abaya said the answer is that Reiv Ame Ha'aretz ma'aser hein. So it's only a chash derabanan. Rava says no. The chash is deraisa, but when we say that in the case, but the case of Meiser, why we're not Cheshish is because we're talking about a Am Ha'aretz who does take off Meiser, but they do not eat Chulin Betara. So now they're going to ask on Rava, Tony Sefer, the fact that in the Sefer, the Mishnah it says, when it speaks about the halachas of a Eishes Am Ha'aretz, the wife of an Am Ha'aretz, it says And by the case of the wife of the Ma'ar's Mishitoto Samayim Tiga, that the minute that she pours water on the flour, so the Ashes Chaver is not allowed to help her. Why? Because at that moment the dough now becomes Hoshul Tuma. So Mechlal, that means that implies that the Reisha Labatuma V'Tara Skinan. That means that the Reisha of our Mishnah is not speaking about Tuma and Tara. Why? Because the Reisha is speaking about that the food yet is not Hoshul Tuma. So if we're talking about an Amoretz, like Rameir's Amoretz, that he takes off Meiser, so what would be the problem over here? It's not susceptible to Tumah at all. So why wouldn't he be matered? So why are you saying that it's only a heter in Dr. Shalom? There's no problem over here. So my answer says Reisha v'Seifa Tumah v'Tara. That means the Reisha and Seifa of our Mishnah is talking about both Tumah and Tara. And we're talking about food that is already susceptible to be Mikabel Tumah. Reisha b'Tumas Chulin. And the difference is that in the Reisha we're talking about Tumas Chulin. Because before it was needed, it wasn't Chayiv and Chala. And since the Isser to Mitameh Chulin is only Midrabanan, Chachamim we're not aser it to be Messiah Mifnei Darkei Shalom. But the Seifa is talking about Tumas Chala, which Tumas Chala is Minatera, because at the time that she actually needs the dough, it becomes also the Tumah. And therefore, the Chacham said that you cannot be Messiah in that case. So now the Gemara asks on Rabba, or I'm going to ask you a stira from the following Brisa. The Brisa says, Toy Chanin. It says that this he's allowed to take payers which are already metuken. He's allowed to take them to grind these payers, and he's allowed to deposit payers which are already metuken, which already meiser was taken off. So not only are you allowed to grind it, but you can grind it and you can deposit it. You can place it by somebody who's choishish to eat payers shvis after zman abir, and even for those who eat their payers in tuma, which are not makbid, like we said, to eat payers patara. And the chiddush is that we're not worried about that. Perhaps he went ahead and he switched the tvua with tvua of shvis, or perhaps he went ahead and touched the betuma. But the Brisa says, but you're not allowed to grind when it comes to your own, that you can go ahead and actually grind it, and then deposit it by somebody who's chayshish for eichli peiris shvis. But to actually go ahead and take the peiris shvis of a person and go ahead and grind it, or people who eat the peiris betuma, that you're not allowed to do. Why? Because you're being misayeh for that person for a dvar avera. So we see clearly that the Brisa asers a person to be misayeh to a person who eats chulin betuma. So the chair that's being seiser Rava, who said that tumah b'chulin is not a problem. According to Rava says that the Mishnah's matter person to be teichen for the Amar to be teichen to eichel tumah betuma, eichel chulin betuma. So Rabbi says Hassam in that Brisa we're talking about b'keina chashud eichel truma betuma askinan. That was a tumah deraisa. He says that Brisa is talking about that a kohen is, we're talking about a kohen over there, who were choishish that he eats truma. We're talking about a kohen who eats truma tahira. He's eating actually truma is tar, but his guf, the kohen's guf, is tameh. That way tumah deraisa, which that is a tumah deraisa. But let's say eating chulin tameim, that is not going to be a problem. It's only a problem with Rabbanon, and therefore Rabba's matter to be Messiah. So Gemara says, if the Bryce is talking about a kohen amoretz, so mafkidin, are you allowed to go ahead and actually deposit the tvua by the kohen? What do you mean? I'm going to ask a shaila from the following Bryce. Bryce says, mafkidin truma yisrael amoretz, you're allowed to deposit truma by Yisrael's and amoretz, even though he's not careful about Tumah Tara. Nevertheless, since Truma is not rogel by him, we're not worried about that. He'll go ahead and actually touch it and be Matayamaya. mitamid. And also, you're not allowed to. Sorry. So mafkid and truma itzal yisrael amaretz. You could give truma by an amaretz. However, you cannot give truma to a amaretz gaspa, because the fact is that this is a kohen who's ruggled to eat truma, and we're worried that he's going to touch the truma betuma. So what do we see from here? We see that a kohen amaretz is choshud to be mitame truma, and the brisa. If the Bryce is talking about a kohen amoretz, why are you allowed to be mafkid by this kohen amoretz? Why are we not worried that he's going to go ahead and touch it and be metamet? So Rabbi says, "Hacham my skin." And what is the Bryce talking about? The first Bryce talking about that the truma is placed where in a kli cheres hamuk of tzomid pasil. We're talking about that the earthenware vessel was he deposited the produce in an earthenware vessel with a tightly bound cover. So in such a case, there's no concern that the kohen who's suspected of taking the truma in a state of tuma will actually touch the produce to render it impure. So you have another problem. But let us be concerned that the kohen's wife, who's a nida, will come and move the keli and be metame the keli, because a nida imparts tuma to the produce inside the keli through moving it, even if the contents are tight, sealed in the vessel. She does not come, even if she doesn't come in direct contact with the actual contents. So he says, "Lo kasha." It's not a question. The two brises are talking about that when you place the truma in the hands of a kohen who's amaretz. However, Khan in the second brisa, which says that it's also talking about fruit that it's already mukhshul tuma, and therefore we're worried that maybe the kohen will be metamet by touching it. Khan, but the first brisa, which says that you're allowed to be mafkid by the kohen, it's talking about bepedish lehuchshulu, is talking about pedish that are not susceptible to mikabel tuma, and therefore we're not choishish. Maybe the kohen went ahead and touched it. Now the Gemara asks another stira on the first brisa. I'm going to ask you a shaila from the following Mishnah. The Mishnah says in Demai, Hamele Gittin, if a person brings Gittin, and this Gittin is already mutukonis, it's already, Meiser was taken off. All the halachas, it's totally kosher Gittin. And he brought it to where? To Techen Kuti, Techen Amoritz. He brought it either to a grinder who's a goy or an Amoritz. So there's a chazaka that we say that it's the same food that you gave him. He gave it back to you, and it's a chazaka that just like you gave him meiser, he didn't play around with it, and also we're not worried that he went ahead and actually switched it and gave you either chitin of tevel or shvis. Now aval, the Mishnah says loy latuma. So when it comes to taking your actual grain and giving it to either a goy, so we say that the goy didn't play tricks on you, and it's the same thing that you gave to the goy. But when it comes to tuma, we're worried that maybe he went ahead and was metamit. So what do we see clearly from this Mishnah? That Amaretz is choshud to touch tuah be tuma. So how could the second brisa say that you can be mafked the tuah by in the hands of somebody who eats peris betuma? Why are you not worried that he's going to touch it? So where it says, "Hi, my rumia," what's the stira? Lav kimna beperish lehushra. We just said that that the other brisa, which says Relado, was talking about that the peris are not mushul tuma. So the Gemara says, "Udikari my karli," and the person who asked the stira, what was he thinking? He didn't know that the brisa is talking about shlehushul tuma. So the Gemara says, really, the makshan, the person who asked the question, Takin knew that we're talking about pedis shlehushul, but he brought the Mishnah into my why mishum the kaboy the mirma achrit Allah, because he wanted to ask another question. Okay, so now and he says like this: Harei elu becheskos in the meiser shvis. In the beginning of the Mishnah, it said that these chitin are becheskos meiser shvis, and we're not worried that the guy went ahead, the goy, the kuti, or the amaretz went ahead and switched the chitin or for tevel or shvis. Now the question is, v'chalufi loy chashina. We're not worried that the amaretz will go ahead and switch it. Or in a minute, I'm going to ask you a question. What's the question? The Mishnah in Brian Demai says that a chaver who's a nice in the chamoise, the chaver gives his mother-in-law His mother-in-law is the wife of an Amoretz, and he gives the bread to his mother-in-law to bake. So what's the halacha? Meiser es shunaisinla. So he has to take off meiser, whatever he gave her, and whatever he takes, he has to take away meiser. Why? Because I'm worried that his mother-in-law will go ahead and change the bread, the sour dough or the spoiled dough with good dough. So what do we see from here? That Ha'aretz is choshet to change food. So how could we say that Gittin is becheskes meiser, and we're not worried that he's going to switch over? I see clearly from the case of the mother-in-law that she will switch over. So the Gemara says no. Hassam over there in the case of the mother-in-law, the tiny time of like the reason is that the reason why she's suspected to switch over is, like the Mishnah itself clearly says, that the mother-in-law wants the good for her daughter-in-law. She wants her daughter-in-law to have very fresh bread, and she's embarrassed of her son-in-law that brought him bread, which is disgusting. So since her kavana is to change it over, so I'm worried that she changed it over with any mutukanes. But in a regular case, and Amar, it's not chayshed to be machlev the chitin for other chitin. So the Gemara says, you're telling me that usually they don't switch over. But we learned in a Mishnah, Hanaisen. This is a Talmud who is being a guest by an Amoritz. So Naisen le fundikis. So a Talmud who is by an Amoritz, who's an innkeeper, and she bakes. So Meiser, so if he gives her the bread to bake for him, so now the halacha is that Meiser es shehu noisinlo. He has to take the Meiser from it, and also because I'm worried that the innkeeper is going to switch it over. So we see clearly that not only by the case of the mother-in-law, but even by the innkeeper, worried that they're going to switch over. So how come in the case of the teichin, we're not worried that the person who takes to do the job will switch it over? So where it says Hassam, the case of the innkeeper, also is the maid of Amra, that she will be made herself and say that she's allowed to switch it over the bread. Why? Because it's better that the Talmud Chacham should eat lechem, which bread which is very hot and fresh, and I'll eat cold and bread. So after a few days, the Talmud is embarrassed. She's going to switch over the bread for him. But in a regular case, I'm not worried. We're not worried about that. There'll be a switch over. We learned in the Brisa, a Eishes Chaver could be Teichin with the wife of an Amaretz. In other words, she can help the wife. Is manshi tmeya when the Chaver is tummy. Why? Because since it's the day, it's been made tumas, so she's worried that she's not going to touch tahiris. However, Oleb is manshiteda, but not when she is tar, because I'm worried that she might eat b'shegeg things which are not musaris. Shimon Lazar Emer Alphas manshitmeya, even when she's tummy titchen, she cannot go ahead and actually grind with the Eishes Amaretz b'neisha chaverta, because the wife of Amaretz, a senes law, will give tuah of her husband, and she might eat it b'shegig. So the Gemara says, "Hashtem b'gnev ganva." If the wife of the Amaretz is chesed to steal mamish the tuah of her husband and give it to her chaverta, like the Brisa says, "Chalufa lemichalfa," we're not worried that she's going to go ahead and switch it. So the Gemara says, "I'm Rabbi Yosef Hasam Nami Merev Amra." Over there also, she'll be she'll start giving hatadim and saying Toida midishi kachol, which means that she's going to say, the ox may eat from its threshing. She thinks that while she's engaged in preparing food, it's permitted for her to take from the food, and it's not considered stealing. So it cannot be learned from here that every Amaretz is suspected of exchanging his own food with that of another. And Mr. Shem, tomorrow we will continue and finish the Perek of Hanizokin and start the 6th Perek of Ha'imer. Mitzvah Shem tomorrow.